What's up, YouTube? My name is Arthur Robinson Jr. I am the creator and host of PowerfulInterviews.com. I am a partner of NationalDiversified.com. I want to welcome each and every one of you to this phenomenal video. In this interview, you're going to experience life-changing information that you will not find anywhere else. I have secured an incredible interview with a great friend of mine, successful businessman, the multi-millionaire. His name is Dr. Gene Landrum. Dr. Gene Landrum was the creator and the first president of the Chuck E. Cheese pizza brand. Dr. Gene Landrum is the best-selling author of his phenomenal book, which is called Profiles of Genius. In this interview, Dr. Gene Landrum, he breaks down layman's terms about you have to develop a wealth mindset. Also in this interview, Dr. Gene Landrum, he breaks down layman's terms about breakdowns and breakthroughs in your business and much, much more. So remember, this is not BS information. The right information will change your current situation. Wealthy people, they take advice from other wealthy people, and unfortunately, broke people, they take advice from broke people. So right about now, go get your pen and your pad, sit back and relax, and write down some notes. In this interview that I'm going to reveal to each and every one of you with my great friend, successful businessman. He was the president of the phenomenal Chuck E. Cheese brand. His name is Dr. Gene Landrum. This interview, it will change your life. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn your notifications on. That way you be well informed when I publish more wisdom audio interviews. So check it out.
Without further ado, I'd like to welcome the one, the only, the powerful Dr. Gene Landrum to the show.
Wow, thank you, Arthur. That's very nice of you. But you can only shoot your age if you get pretty old. So, in any case, and I never had a golf lesson, and I've been a very good athlete my whole life. I had all kind of scholarships to go to college when I was in high school. I was a very, very good athlete, and I have very good eye-hand coordination. And so I just went out and started hitting a golf ball. And golf is very, very difficult, as your listeners probably know. It's one of the tough games in the world, but I have now grown old enough that I'm not driving the ball in somebody's living room windows anymore. So anyway, so I've been very fortunate that I have good eye-hand coordination, and I've stayed this way. So anyway, but I appreciate your comments and look forward to chatting with all your fans. Okay.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Dr. Gene, for coming on my show and educating my listeners worldwide, and most of my listeners are entrepreneurs and business owners, about your phenomenal book, Profiles of Power and Success, and how you actually started the Chuck E. Cheese brand. I gladly appreciate it.
Hey, with your kids, right? And that's a funny story how I started that, too. It was, at some point, you may want to ask me some questions on it, because people said, how did you do that restaurant? In fact, I got to tell you a quick story on it. I was trying to do a joint venture, because I was with Atari at the time, and we were selling games, coin-operated games, pinball machines, stuff like that, and video games. And I was trying to, we didn't want to be in the food business, so the chairman, I was president, and the chairman, Nolan Bushnell, sends me to Memphis, Tennessee, to meet and have lunch with a guy named Mike Rose, who was the chairman of Holiday Inn. And I went there because, and he played racquetball and I did. We played together. But I told him, I said, you guys do food. We don't want to do food. Why don't we just do a joint venture? Why don't we you do all the food and we'll put the games in there? And he looked at me. He said, Gene, this is a true story, Arthur. He said, Gene, are you aware that we spend a lot of money and time and energy killing rats in our restaurant, and you have a rat character delivering a pizza to kids and families? Wow. He said, you can't do that, Gene. And I looked at him and I said, Mike, you know what? I didn't know I couldn't, and I did. and we are doing 3 times the revenue of the average pizza store in the United States at 23% pre-tax profits. And he almost fainted, you know. That was a true story. Anyway, so sometimes you got to be willing to go where the pack doesn't want you to go, Arthur. So your fans need to remember that, okay?
All righty. Now, Dr. Gene, can you explain to the listeners in your own influential way, who is the powerful Dr. Gene Landrum? How long have you been in your powerful industry, and what is your expertise?
Well, my expertise is that I have, I'm fortunate that I'm reasonably bright, I guess, but I have always been willing to go where other people wouldn't go. And I think I told you this story, Arthur. When I did the first Chuck.E. cheese, I brought my mother. This was 1977. I brought my mother out. She was from Cincinnati, and I brought my mom out, and I told her, I said, Mom, I did this thing. I went in the back room, and I had one of the kids get into a rat costume and take my mother a beer. She liked her beer, and I sat there, and I said, Mom, I created this. I designed it, and a lot of people think I'm like kind of goofy doing this, but I said, we're doing really quite well, and I'm the president, and I'm going to build a bunch of these, Mom. And I asked her, I said, Mom, tell me the truth. Tell me. And my mother, Arthur, was from the old school, from the Midwest. She thought you went to school, and then you got a desk, sat at a desk somewhere, and then someday later on somebody gave you a watch, and they gave you a pension or something. And so she was from that old school, and I said, Mom, tell me, what do you think, Mom? And my mother, Arthur, looked at me and said, honey, when are you going to get a real job?
Wow.
And that's a true story, you know. So sometimes, you know, you shouldn't necessarily listen to your parents because you have to respect them, but they got to live their life the way they did, and you have the right, you can quote Dr. Gene said, you have the right to live your life the way you want to, okay?
Mm-hmm. Now, Dr. Gene, did you ever thought that the Chuck.E. Cheese phenomenal brand will actually grow into a multi-million-dollar company?
Well, no, I didn't in the early days. I didn't at all. I just thought we'd build a few of them, and then I would go ahead and own a couple myself and just do that. So I didn't really think of it in that way, but it just kind of took off and became much greater than I thought it would be, to tell you the truth. And very candidly, and that was a very good question, Arthur, because here's what happens. I happen to be, I do a lot of work, and anyone ever wants to get one of my books, I write about how the brain works. And our brains, I happen to be very, very right-brained. And that's big, the right side of your brain is your big picture. You see the big stuff. And I was always like that. And I'm very impulsive. You said it earlier. What am I about? I'm impulsive. I'm impatient. And I don't want to do the same thing over and over. I just don't want to do that. I never wanted to do that. And I get tired, and if I do something new, I want to go do something else new. And that's just the way it is. So that's what makes charges my engine. And so consequently, you've got to recognize what it is that your upside and your downside. And a lot of people don't, Arthur. A lot of people don't get why they've done stuff and failed, or people don't like them. And a lot of people didn't necessarily in the early days think I was very, smart or very, kind of guy to hire, because I didn't want to keep doing it. I want to go do something else.
Wow. This is an incredible interview, and I appreciate you coming on my show today.
Oh, okay. Well, that's fine, and we can talk about not doing things. And I don't know if you know, Joseph Campbell was one of the great Americans who had a quote called "Follow your bliss." He said, "Not somebody else's, not your parents, follow yours." and your bliss, just whatever turns you on, and you kind of need to do that. And so I talk about him. In fact, I got to tell you, do I have time to tell a story here?
Yeah.
Arthur? Okay, I was making a speech in Sarasota, Florida, up on the by the beach. It was a big hotel, and this is a true story, Arthur. And I was making a speech, and I finished my speeches back then. I used to always finish them with, just follow your bliss. Not somebody else's, not your parents. They got to do what they want to do. You follow yours. And just do what you want to do. And I walked off this is a true story, Arthur. I walked off of the stage, and a very attractive blonde lady walked up and said, "Hey, Doc, you blew me away." And she said, "I want to buy some of your books from you, Doc." I said, "Okay, that's nice." I said, "Anything?" And she said, "Yes, you really confused me." She said, I'm really, I need to talk to you. She said, "I have a PhD in psychology." What do you hear this? True story. She said, "I have a PhD, a doctorate in psychology." And she said, "Where is it?" I said, "What?" And she kind of blew me away. I said, "What? What are you talking about?" She said, "Where's that bliss? You told me to follow my bliss. Where can I find it?" I almost fainted. I almost collapsed. I made a PhD in psychology. And you know what I did? I'm pretty quick on my feet, Arthur. I looked at her. I said, "Honey, what gives you goosebumps? What would you do if you could do anything? You have a doctorate in psych. Do you want to get on a boat, a ship, and just lecture and go around the world and not have to sit at a desk anywhere or do a job?" I said, "Go. Go." I said, "You're sharp. You want to buy a boutique over in South Beach in Miami?" I said, "Do it. Go do it. Not next year, not next month, next week. Quit your job." She looked at me like I was, was off of a strange ship.
Wow.
Any case, but we have to do that, Arthur. We have to follow our bliss. We have to chase what it is that turns us on, and we just have to do that. In fact, on that subject, I call it Gestalt in some of my books. Wayne Gretzky, remember Wayne Gretzky, the great hockey player? I mean, I don't know if you're aware, he broke every hockey record there was by the time he was 22 years old, wow. 23 years old. And I don't know if you're aware of this about Gretzky. I don't know much about hockey. But Gretzky he broke every record there ever was. And Gretzky, I don't know if you're aware of it, was like 6 foot tall. He was a normal size. He didn't have abnormal muscles. The guys sitting on the bench were bigger, faster, stronger, everything. And the coaches, they didn't get it. They said, "What the hell has this guy got that the other people ain't got?" And they asked him. They said, "Hey, Wayne, what is it?" And you know what he said, Arthur?
What did he say?
He said, "Oh, I never skate to where the puck is. I skate to where it's going to be."
Wow.
Is that strong or what?
That is powerful.
Is that powerful? He said, and that's what we have to do in life, Arthur. We have to go to where we're going to be, not where we are. Get out of the box. And I do lectures on this stuff. If any of your listeners ever want me to speak or lecture, I lecture on this, and I actually use a slide. I'm lecturing in Canada, Toronto, in fact, in a couple of months. And I have a big slide with a big box. And I said, "Hey, if the box is closed and you're in the box, get the box open. And get out of the box." Because I tell them the box is a mediocrity. That's where the mediocre people are. They're sitting in a box. It's safe in the box, right? But it ain't very good. Get out of the box.
Now, Dr. Gene, can you explain to the listeners what is the success recipe to build a phenomenal restaurant business like the Chuck.E. Cheese brand?
Okay, it's not just Chuck.E. Cheese, it's almost any business. And I use in my lectures a lot of times a guy named Fred Smith. I don't know if you ever heard of FedEx. We ship all of our stuff overnight, FedEx, Federal Express. And The guy who started that's name was Fred Smith, and Fred was an interesting guy, and I talk about him. If you want to be big, bet big, like Fred. And I don't know if you know what happened, but this is a true story. Fred was having trouble. He couldn't get financing because on FedEx, people wouldn't give him any money. And he had come from some money, but he put all his money in FedEx, and he was out of money. He was broke, and he was going to have to file bankruptcy.
Wow.
And he was sitting in Chicago. He'd gone to Chicago to get some money, and they turned him down. And this is a true story. This always intrigued me. He was in Chicago, and he was going to the airport to go back to Memphis to close down FedEx because it was over. And but he always walked around. I don't know if you're aware of it. Successful people carry a lot of money around in their pocket. I used to hang around, Bushnell and those guys in Silicon Valley. They always had a couple $1,000 bills in their pocket. I don't know if you know that, $100 bills, and had thousands. And he had $500 in his pocket. He's in Chicago, and and back then you could do this. You can't do it anymore. And you could just go, if you had a ticket, you could just go jump on an airplane and go to a different city. Stop that, the government, but. So he went, instead of going back to Memphis, he got on a plane going to Las Vegas. He had $500 in his pocket, and he went to Vegas, and he sat at a blackjack table, and this true story, he sat all night. He played all night, and he got on a winning streak. He won $27,000 in Vegas playing blackjack.
Wow.
$27,000. He won. He got on a plane, went back to Memphis, and saved the company, saved FedEx. True story. Isn't that an interesting story? I mean, unbelievable. Unbelievable.
Wow.
Any case. So,
Dr. Gene, explain to the listeners, what is the best advice that you have ever received?
Oh, I've received a lot from a lot of different people. But sometimes, you got to chase your own dreams and not chase others' dreams. It's not as much advice, I guess, as one of the things I talk about is breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. Sometimes if you run out of money or you haven't got it and you're not doing well, and I don't like to talk about this on air usually, but I like you. I think I'm going to tell you a very personal story, which is not good. I was a very good salesman early and I hadn't gone to college or anything, and I was selling over in Florida on the East Coast in Fort Lauderdale, and I was doing really quite well. And my wife ran with my kids down the road, and she went through a red light and and hit a 18-wheeler, hit a big semi, flipped the car, killed my daughter, killed the babysitter. I may have trouble talking about this, but it was really, really bad and really tragic. And I almost, in fact, I lost my voice. I couldn't speak for a while. And let me tell you what happened, though. And the reason I'm telling this story, Arthur, is that tragedy, it almost killed me. I almost couldn't make it. And then I couldn't stand it anymore, and I left her. I left my wife, and I met some guy, and I got a deal to go to New Orleans, and I could get a sales job there, but I could go to school. I could go to Tulane. And I don't know if you're aware of it. I have a bachelor's degree from Tulane University, and how I got it was I went to New Orleans. I just wanted to get out of town and go do my thing, and I started selling there, and I was going to Tulane, and just so you know, I got a bachelor's degree in 5 years. Wow. Just going to school and selling all day, selling systems all day, computer stuff, and going to school during the day and night, and it almost, killed me. I was going crazy. But in any case, and then I got my degree, and then I just kept on going. I was so successful there. The people in this computer company were so impressed. They said, "We're going to give you a job." And this is a true story. This is another funny story. They said, "The only thing we have open, we'll give you the state of West Virginia." I don't know if you know about. Well, you're from Philadelphia, right?
That's absolutely correct.
Yeah, and West Virginia is not far from there. Well, the state of West Virginia back then, we're talking about now 35 years ago or something, 40 years ago, and West Virginia was the worst in the United States. It was coal country and the highest unemployment in the country, and the office they gave me, this is a true story, and your listeners need to pay attention to this. It was the worst office this company I was working for had in the United States. Worst. It was awful. It had never made quota in its history. And it was awful. And a couple of my friends called me and said, "Gene, have you been drinking too much? What are you doing? You're going to West Virginia? Are you in a coal mining country? What are you doing, dude?" And I said, "Well, it's the office they offered me. They offered me the whole state, so I'm going to run the state and do the best I can." And let me tell you, Arthur, sometimes your listeners got to get this. I happen to have been pretty successful and got some big jobs, but one of the reasons is I went to a place that wasn't supposed to make it, and I made it. In my first year, I made quota. It had never made quota in its history. And the next year, I was the number one office in that class in the United States. And then in the next year, they promoted me and made me a vice president in California. And the whole point here is, how did I become a vice president? Was I qualified? Nope, I wasn't. But what happened is that I had done something that nobody thought was possible. And they thought I was pretty young at the time. I was in my early 20s. And they thought I was the wildest, craziest young guy in the universe. In fact, it's how I learned to talk, to tell you the truth. What they did was they put me on to make a speech in Pebble Beach. I don't know if you know where that is, in Monterey Peninsula in California. They sent me to Pebble Beach, put me there. It's what they have the Bing Crosby Open and all it's one of the great golf courses in the world. And they sent me out there and telling me to talk and tell these people how I had done such an incredible thing. Everybody there was like my father or my grandfather. I mean, and they had me talking to those people. And it's actually how I learned to speak, because I never had a course or anything on how to make a talk. But I went out there and I just said, I'm just going to tell them what I did. And I did, and so consequently, when you work hard and bad things, and I call it now in my books, breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. Because sometimes when you, I don't know if you're aware of Walt Disney, are you aware that his first animation thing he went bankrupt, and then he got another job, he got fired, and then they stole all of his stuff, and that's how he started Disney Studios. I don't know if you're aware of that.
Wow. Didn't he go bankrupt a couple of times?
He did, 2 or 3 times, yeah. And sometimes you got to hit the bottom to get to the top. That's just the way it works. You got to get to the bottom. And you know what you learn when you're at the bottom? You're learning how to cope. You're learning how to handle bad stuff. Okay? You learn how to do that. And you learn it very well when you're walking at the bottom.
Wow. So when you became the president of the phenomenal brand Chuck.E. Cheese, it's actually good to go against the grain to actually experience what you want.
You are experiencing a life-changing, powerful interview, and you are hearing it first from Arthur Robinson Jr.'s PowerfulInterviews.com.
Exactly. What you do is you actually get to go do things that are very unusual. I was doing things that most people thought at Chuck.E. Cheese was ridiculous. That I was, having a rat deliver a pizza to birthday parties, and I was actually doing that. And I think I told you the story of the Holiday Inn CEO. I think I told you. I mean, he said, "Gene, you can't do that. What are you doing? You can't do that." I said, "Well, I didn't know I couldn't, and I did, and I'm doing kind of good." it's actually true. You really learn from doing stuff, and you have to have that optimistic view. Mm-hmm. It's very, very important that you. I do one lecture, Arthur, on. Have you ever heard of the Pike syndrome? I don't know if you ever heard of that.
No. Tell me a little more about it. Okay,
it's a fish. A pike is a fish. In fact, it's one of the most fierce carnivorous predatory fish. It's really a violent fish. Wow. Well, this is very important for your listeners to hear. This pike fish, they now call it the Pike syndrome. What they did was they put a pike into a big tank, and they had all the little minnows and everything that it ate over on the other side of this glass barrier. And the pike would go over there and have to get hungry and want to eat. And they'd go, and the pike hit this window. You couldn't get to the fish. It kept hitting the window. And it hit the window and hit the window and hit the window, and then it got smart enough to stop trying, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of us do that. And so it no longer. And so what did they do? They removed the window.
Wow.
And guess what happened?
The
pike starved to death because it had been so conditioned to not try to go there, it never went again and starved to death. Mm. Wow. Now, and the reason I use this with people, do people do this? Yeah.
Yes, they do.
Yeah, they absolutely do. They absolutely do. So you have to understand that you just can't get so conditioned by what happens to you that you can no longer do it. And I have this thing I do on creativity. You want a new house on your lot, Arthur? What do you got to do? You got to tear down the one that's there. Mm. Now, if you really want a brand new house, you've got to tear it down. Now, most people aren't willing to do that. Your wife will say, "You ain't doing that. Stop it. Shut up." Well, we have to, if we want to alter our mindsets, Arthur, how we think, we got to change how we think. Mm-hmm. Okay? And does stuff happen? Yeah. Cars, I use this all the time. Cars improve our transportation. What happens? Do we have air pollution? Yeah.
That's right.
Because stuff's coming out of the back of that car. And just the same way, it tranquilizes. If you're nervous and all shook up, and they have drugs now that they give people. They give them tranquilizers. It frees us of anxiety. Mm. What does it do? We have a cost of sensitivity. We're not nearly as sensitive anymore because we don't care. Right?
Mm. For some people, it is true.
And it is. And I use something that's really simple so people get it, and my students get it. Phones are really good, aren't they? They improve our communication unbelievable.
That's right.
But what happens? We pay a cost. Do we have any privacy? Can we drive in a damn car anymore without the damn phone ringing? It's consequent. It's always right. Mm-hmm. And people are calling us that we don't want to talk to. Okay? So that's what happens to us. Okay? So I just wanted to go over that because I write about that. My latest book is Icons and Con Artists. And icons, that's what it's all about. When icons pay a price. Okay? It's anyway, do you play golf, Arthur?
No, I don't play golf, but I'm definitely anxious in getting involved with playing golf.
Okay, well, I play a lot, and I've gotten old enough that I can shoot my age now, but I do a thing in golf called NLP, and you probably haven't heard of that. It's a psychological term called neuro-linguistic programming.
Oh, I heard of it.
Oh, have you? It's modeling behavior to improve behavior. Okay? And came out of UCLA, and a guy from UCLA says, we do not just see an action, we also experience it, what it feels like to someone else. and we internalize it, and it's absolutely true. What happens to us is that we in LLP we see it and in our unconscious minds, and we become pretty adept at doing it. So we got to stop thinking. In fact, I tell people all the time. They said, "How did you just do that? How did you hit that ball?" I said, "I cut off my head." I said I cut off my head because I didn't want to be thinking. Because if you're thinking, what do? We think, and we get worried, and we're worried about doing something that's not wonderful, and we try to keep from worrying, and that's really not good. And in fact, I got to tell you this one more. Let me get you. I got all these stories, but I've done a lot of work on how the mind works and how I don't know if you're aware of it or your people, but if you hang around with someone that's very positive, it's really good for you because it rubs off on you. When you're positive around positive people, there's all kinds of psychological stuff now that shows that you become more positive. And if you hang around with pessimists, you become less positive. You become more pessimistic.
That's right. I love the positive energy. Exactly.
Now, let me tell you what really happens. This is really strange. They did a study, a guy named John Diamond. He's a psychiatrist out of Australia. He did a study, and he put optimists in a room and said, sit there and talk to this other guy. And he sent in a pessimist. This is a true story. This is unbelievable. Where do you hear this? And so I said, well, what do you want to talk about? Let's talk about it. No, we don't care. Talk about your families. Talk about your golf game. Talk about hitting a tennis ball. Talk about your life, your job. Do you hate your boss? Or you love your boss? Whatever. And this is a true story, Arthur. What happened was the optimist sits there for an hour and talks with a pessimist. And do you know what happened, Arthur?
What happened? When
they walk out the room, they tested them. They did psychological test on their energy level that was flowing through their system. Mm-hmm. You know what happened to the optimist?
What happened?
They became much more negative.
Wow.
And they did a muscle test. Their muscles were actually weaker. They were actually weaker by just sitting and talking to somebody who was a pessimist. And guess what happened to the pessimist?
What happened?
They came out, they were stronger.
Wow.
And they were more positive. Is that unbelievable or what?
That is phenomenal.
It is unbelievable. So what it does is tell us, where should we hang? You got to be hanging with, and I tell people have asked me, well, what if my wife is doing this? I said, well, I don't want to get messed up here in your personal thing with your marriage, but I'm telling you, you cannot afford to be hanging with someone who's telling you you're a yo-yo, you're weak, you're wrong, whatever. You can't afford it. You just can't. It's not good. It's really bad for you. So get out.
If you want to soar, you got to fly with eagles, and you can't hang with the ducks.
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, right. And in fact, one of the lectures I do, I use and you've probably known these guys. Have you ever known the gym rat? They go to the damn gym. Oh, I have a son like this. He goes to the gym 5 days a week. I don't know they call them gym rats. They're always in the gym. They're trying to work out, get themselves stronger, get themselves better, and whatever. And they hang there. And then I call their opposites, I call them couch potatoes. Have you ever known a couch potato? They just sit, drink beer, eat chips, right?
And don't do nothing.
They've never been in a gym, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is the gym rats are ripped, and they don't need to be going there every day, okay? And they can sit on the couch once in a while, but they get themselves absolutely programmed. And then a couch potato just does the opposite. So what you have to do is learn to change. And say, Dr. Gene told me I got to go at least be a gym rat twice a week. And the gym rat's got to tell himself, I'm going to be a couch potato. for 10 days, okay, or whatever. Anyway, so you have to actually do that, and I lecture on that pretty extensively, and I tell my students, I'm not this is good for your radio show, but I call it become an icon artist. I tell them, write drunk, revise sober, con yourself. And my students look at me, write drunk. You tell me to go drink? No. You're going to get me fired now. But if you write something, and I don't know if you've ever tried to write a book or write your memoirs, Arthur, or your people listening, you should do that. Get drunk. Go ha ha ha. Just let it flow. Just go goofy. Then go back, and when you're revising it, do it like as if you're sober. In other words, what am I saying here? First get loose, then get real.
Wow.
That's what I call an icon artist. Write drunk, revise sober. Dr. Gene told you that today, okay, everybody? You got that?
Powerful. Dr. Gene, can you explain to the listeners in your own powerful way, what inspired you to write your phenomenal book, Profiles of Power and Success? And can you explain to the listeners the experience that you had with the phenomenal Steve Jobs?
Well, I had that experience with Jobs, knowing that he was off the map. He was a bright guy. He was very different. He was very unique. And because of that, he went to places other people wouldn't go. And when I decided to write my first book, that's what I was doing. I said, just be like Steve. Just go do it, even though you have no experience doing it. Just go do it. And I actually call it accidental sagacity. Go do and be smart without knowing why you're trying to be smart. It's what I call an epiphany. I don't know if I mentioned this to you on air or your listeners, but when I started Chuck.E. Cheese, I want to know why it was so successful. Every city in the United States has an ordinance that you cannot put two games. Because back in the 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, every city thought a pinball machine was a hangout for a drug pusher, for the bad people, and it was really bad. And so you couldn't. So they passed a law saying you could only have two. You could have a cigarette machine and a pinball machine. I don't know if you're aware of that, your listeners. Every city in the United States has a law. You can only have one pinball machine and one cigarette machine, or you could have two cigarette machines, or you could have two pinball machines. You have two. That's all you can have. They got laws, and you can't do that. And what I was doing is, in my early days, when I wanted to do Chuck.E. Cheese, I went to Disneyland. I hung out there, and it occurred to me, well, Disneyland has hundreds of games. Hundreds. I said, wait a minute. What makes Disneyland different? They can have hundreds and nobody else can have any? And it hit me between the eyes. This is a true story, Arthur. I was walking out of Disneyland. I was going to go get on the plane to fly back in Northern California, and I said, I got it. I'm going to build a mini Disney Chuck.E. Cheese. I'm going to make it a Disneyland that's small. It's a mini Disneyland. But if I do that, they're not going to be allowed to tell me I can't put more games in there.
Wow.
And it is a true story. And here, let me tell you one more story about this. To do this, I decided I didn't want it to be a hangout like a game arcade. I didn't want to have a game arcade. I wanted to have a restaurant that was uniquely different, that had some games. And so there's a fine line there, Arthur, between what you can do. So what I put up a sign. This is a true story. This is unbelievable. One of the greatest stories I have on this. I'm the president. Nolan Bushnell is the chairman. He was around. He was running around Europe. He had millions of dollars. He wasn't around. He let me just do whatever I wanted. So I opened the first store, and I put up a sign that says, no 18-year-olds permitted without a parent. because I didn't want it to be a hangout as an arcade. Mm-hmm. So I put that sign up, and Bushnell walked in. He came back into town in my first store, and he said, "What are you doing, dude? Take it down immediately." Now, this is the chairman of the board. He said, "Take down that silly sign." And as you probably can tell from talking to me, I'm pretty resilient. Did I listen? No.
Wow.
He's chairman. He could have fired me. I didn't listen to him. I refused to take it down. And then a week later, he walked in and he said, "You know what, Gene? You're a genius." This is a true story. "You're a genius." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I told you to take that down, that sign, and you refused to do so. Change the sign. Reduce it to 14-year-olds. And he said, "No 14-year-olds. Anyway, and of course, the thing here for your listeners is sometimes you've got to be nice about it, but don't listen to your boss, because your boss will not be right. And you got to do it diligently and make sure you don't get fired. Okay, so and I write about, and I talk about this, Arthur, the paradox of creativity. I don't know if I mentioned this to you before, but I think I may have. But the paradox of creativity. Are you aware that 20% of all the high school dropouts are gifted? They have high IQs. I don't know if you knew that or not. One out of every 5 that are dropouts, they don't go through high school. They have over 130 IQ.
Wow.
They're really bright.
Is that the same experience that the phenomenal Henry Ford had?
Yeah, to some degree, exactly. He didn't, and they are. But just so you know, I've done a lot of work, and I study this now. At age 5, are you aware of this? I don't know if you have children, Arthur, but at age 5, whatever kid they have, 100% of whatever creativity they have at age 5, they got it all of us. I didn't make this up. This comes right out of the psychological journals. At 5, your kids got all of their creativity. At 7, you know how much they have left?
How much?
Half.
Wow.
What the hell happened between age 5 and age 7? Think about it. They went to school, and the teacher said, "Sit here, shut up. You can't say that. Do what I tell you to do. Draw within the lines." Ha! True story. And by 16, I have the data on this, they've lost 75%. By the time they get to high school, they've lost 3/4 of all their creative potential they got in their brain. It's gone. It's gone. And by age 25, they've lost 99%. You only have 1% left by the time you get to be 25 years old. I didn't make this up. This is true.
Wow.
You only have 1% of your creative potential by the time you get to be 25 years old, because people have said, "Shut up, draw within the lines, do not," and guess what? The famous school dropouts, who do you think they are? They never got through college. A guy named Bill Gates,
Henry Ford,
Michael Dell, Steve Jobs, Larry Ellison, the great geniuses who are now billionaires. And guess what? Had they, kept going to school, would they be a billionaire? Nope.
No.
Ain't gonna happen. Not gonna happen. You can't do that. And in fact, I know we're getting close to the end here. I once read a book, a guy, Ray Bradbury. Have you ever heard of him? Ray Bradbury. He wrote a book called Fahrenheit 451.
Wow.
It was one of these, and he had no ability to write a book. He didn't, know anything about writing books. And he wrote it back in, I think it was 30, 40 years ago. And I don't know if you know what Fahrenheit 451 is. That's a temperature of 451 that burns books. Huh.
Wow.
And you know what he said? He said, you don't have to burn books to destroy a culture. Just get people to stop reading them.
You are experiencing a life-changing, powerful interview, and you are hearing it first from Arthur Robinson Jr.'s PowerfulInterviews.com.
Wow. Unbelievable. And what he does in the book, he is a fireman, a guy who's he worked in a firehouse. He's a fireman. This guy's name was Guy Montag, and he has an epiphany. And his epiphany is he changes from a man hating books to a man who loves books. Okay? So, and that's what that book is all about. So it's not a book that I wrote, but it is very famous.
So you have to love knowledge.
You have to, exactly, and you have to chase information and knowledge, and it's kind of what you're doing. You're talking to me. A lot of people don't talk to me or listen to me. I have, some ex-wives like that. and you have to, go chase things. And as you know, we lost one of the wonderful guys, Yogi, last week, the Yankee, Yogi Berra. And Yogi didn't have much schooling, but I always loved the quote by Yogi. Yogi said, "The future ain't what it used to be."
Dr. Dean, can you explain to the listeners in your own influential way, what is your definition of marketing, and what does marketing mean to you?
Okay, that's a very good question. Marketing is strictly promotion. Marketing is the ability to sell yourself, sell what your product is, so in your case, sell your radio show. Marketing is getting other people to want what you got. And I think I told you I've been put into the Entrepreneurial Hall of Fame. Why? I've always been a marketing guy. I have, without even knowing it. I did before I ever knew anything about marketing. I was very good at marketing. I understand that marketing is promotion. It's taking what you got and making other people want that. That's what marketing is about. Okay, you have got to be able to do that to get people to want your products, want what you're selling. Okay, and that's really, 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 really key. And it's so important. And a lot of people don't realize it takes. And one of the examples I use in one of my books is Michael Dell, and we all heard about Dell computers, right?
That's right.
At 12 years old, Michael Dell decided to sell stamps, and he made $2,000 selling stamps. It's actually a true story. And then when he was going to go to college, he dropped out in his freshman year. And his parents, he didn't tell his parents. He thought they were going to shoot him. His parents were both well-educated. And he just dropped out. He said, I don't need to go to college. And he said, this is ridiculous. And so he he goes and launches at 18 years old, Dell Computers. And he became a billionaire by the time he was 32 years old. Wow. 32 years old, he's a billionaire because he dropped out of school. Okay? And I do a lecture on this, and it takes you, think about this a minute. I have a theory that it takes 10 years to become great and another 10 to become absolutely, incredible. It takes 20 years. So the journey to the top is 10 years. What did Michael Dell do? He started selling stamps at 12. He went and had started his own company but by the time he was 21. And by the time he was 32, he was a billionaire. Don't got to work no more, dude.
Wow. So he shifted his paradigm and actually pursued and immersed himself with specialized knowledge.
Exactly what he did. And by the way, I have many, many, many studies on this. I use Michael Dell, but let's talk about somebody else your listeners all have heard of, a gal named Oprah. Oprah, as you probably know, dropped out of college at 19 and started a TV. It went on TV. And are you aware? Now think about this, what I just said. 19. She goes and starts doing TV and doing her own little show down in Memphis. Or Nashville, was it? I think it was Nashville. Maybe it was Memphis. And then at 29, she became a talk show maven in Chicago. She became one of the talk show queens, and guess what? Are you aware at 39? Think of what I just told you. 19, she does TV. 29, she starts her talk show. At 39, she was the first self-made black female billionaire. First one in the world. Billionaire. What'd you do? 19, 29, 39. Huh. Wow.
Well,
and so your listeners need to tell themselves, I'm going to put 10 years on the table and work my butt off, and then I'm going to take another 10, and I'm going to be one of Dr. Gene's dudes. Okay?
Wow. Actually, Oprah is a outside-the-box, unconventional thinker.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, earlier, we was having a powerful conversation about Henry Ford, and I know that you said in 5 years he built a $5 billion company. Can you explain to the listeners in your own influential way the Henry Ford brand, and how did he build a $5 billion brand? And what inspired you to write your other phenomenal book, Cover Your Assets?
Okay, well, I'll do those one at a time because the CYA thing is a different thing. But Henry Ford, he went and built the thing. Actually, built it in his living room. He had to dare to tear down the front door to get that first car out of his living room. He built that car, and he everybody was telling him he was nuts. And it was, 1906, I think. Anyway, he did the Model T in 1914. He launched it, and everybody said that he was absolutely crazy. And then in 5 years, he went from being crazy to becoming a billionaire. And what if he listened? He didn't. He didn't listen at all. And then, as you know, I wrote a book called Cover Your Assets, CYA, because people were always telling me, you can't do that, Gene. And I finally said CYA. I was doing a radio show, a whole bunch at the time, and that's what I called it, CYA. Cover your, and what we say on the street, we say cover your ass, right?
That's right.
But I called it cover your assets. So I could get away with it, which is kind of the same thing, is covering the money you got, so you're not losing it to some stupid thing. So you got to do your cover your assets thing, and kind of do what you're not supposed to be doing. And so I called it that, and I thought it was pretty interesting because I sold a bunch of them. They're hardcovers in CYA, but you have to be able to do that, Arthur. You just have to be able to do it. Okay. And I draw a thing, as you know, in my books, a risk-reward curve, which is just that. It's where are you living? Are you living where you have low rewards or high rewards? Most people, most of the world, they don't want to lose what they got, so they don't take any risk. Well, you aren't going to win a whole bunch if you don't risk a bunch. It drives me crazy.
You have to be a risk taker.
You got to be a risk taker. It drives me crazy.
Dr. Gene, from your own personal experience, can you explain to the listeners, what do billionaires and millionaires do that unfortunately broke entrepreneurs just don't do?
Okay, well, one of the simple things is, and we just saw it just very recently, Jeff Bezos. Are you aware that Jeff Bezos, the guy who's most famous for doing what? Amazon.com, right?
That's right.
Have we all been on Amazon? Yeah. Are you aware that he's a very bright guy. He came out of Miami. He went to Miami High School down here near me. He was very bright, and he went to Princeton, and he got out of Princeton, and because he was very bright, they gave him a big job. He was in New York City. True story. When do you hear this? He was making $1 million a year in New York City.
Wow.
And he was sitting one day, and it was 1994, I believe it was, or 94. He was sitting, and he said, oh, my God, there's this thing coming out. Are you aware there was no Internet at the time? It was just coming around. Mm-hmm. And he said, oh, my gosh, I could sell some books on that thing. And he thought about it. He went home, and this is a true story. He went home, and he sat. Should I quit my $1 million a year job? You know what he did? It's called the regret minimalization that I talk about extensively. Do you have a regret minimalization theory? And he said, regret minimalization. Well, I regret more quitting my job, making $1 million a year. He was 29 years old now. Or will I regret more not chasing this dream I got? And he sat there and he meditated. I don't know how much wine he drank, but he must have drank some. And he sat there and he came out. He said, I'm out of here. He walked in the next morning, quit. He quit his job. He got in a car. He started driving across the United States in writing out a business plan how he's going to start Amazon. And just so you know, he and his wife slept in a park. They slept on the floor. They had no money. Zero when he started Amazon. He ended up in Seattle, Washington, and he had no money, no nothing, sleeping on the floor. And then it took him, and you have to do this if you want to become rich and famous. And then, of course, he launched Amazon a couple years later, and now he's sleeping on any floor he wants anywhere in the universe. What's he worth? I think he's worth $25 or $30 billion.
Wow.
$30 billion. And I ask people, would you quit $1 million? I used to ask my students this all the time. Would you quit $1 million job? And I ask 1,000 students this. Guess what? You know how many, Arthur? None. Zero. Nobody would quit $1 million job. And I said, how many? Then I asked the question, how would you like to be a billionaire? Guess what? Every one of them wants to be a billionaire. And I look at them and say, you know what? You can't have it both ways, baby. If you ain't willing to quit what you got, you ain't getting what you want. Remember Dr. Gene told you that.
You have to sacrifice in order to, actually get involved with the bigger picture.
You absolutely have to. You have to sacrifice what you got to get what you want. So remember that. And I think we're about running out of time here because I have a doctor's appointment, so I'm going to have to get out of here. But is there any last question or anything you want? Or?
Dr. Gene, can you explain to the listeners, I have a two-part question for you before we go. What do you like to do for fun, and do you have any last pearls of wisdom for the listeners?
Well, I like to do for fun what I really enjoy doing, and just so you know, and I shouldn't say this on air probably, I just had a big birthday. I just turned 80 years old.
Wow.
And I am going, and thank you, and I'm going, as you can tell, I'm still reasonably swift, because if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. And I am going, 3 months from now, I'm going out and skiing down a black diamond at 10,000 feet up in the air.
Wow.
And there ain't many guys up there like me. Okay? So what do? I chase what I love. I chase what I really enjoy doing, and I'm going to keep doing it as long as I can do it. Okay? And what was your second part of that question?
Do you have any last pearls of wisdom for the listeners? And can you explain to the listeners exactly where they can find you?
Well, I said it earlier, chase your dream. You got a dream. Don't listen to your parents. Don't listen to your mates. Don't listen to nobody. You don't respect everybody that loves you, but you don't got to do what they do. You get to do what you do, or what Dr. Gene says you can do. Chase your dream. Okay?
To everyone that is listening on this show, I highly recommend get involved with the phenomenal Dr. Gene Landrum. You hear the passion that came through his voice today. Go to his phenomenal website. He has some powerful content on his website, and invest in yourself. All successful people, the billionaires and millionaires that I know, they love to read. All leaders are readers, and invest in his phenomenal books, Profiles of Power and Success. His other phenomenal book, Cover Your Assets. And
Icons. Well, my newest one is Icons and Con Artists. And by the way, I just did a shutdown deal on my website, so just tell them to go genelandrum@earthlink.net, okay? That's my email. Just email me, tell them you heard me on here, and I'll give you I'll tell you what I'll do. Arthur, I dig you, man. I'll give them, it's a $20 book, I'll give it to them for $10. Okay?
Wow. To everyone that's listening on this show, get involved with that irresistible offer and email Dr. Gene Landrum. He is a phenomenal professional speaker. He is a man that has impeccable wealth of knowledge. So get involved with him and invest in his phenomenal books. It will take your mindset, and you will start shifting your paradigm and developing take action habits and you can actually take yourself and your business to the next level. So, to everyone that's listening, remember that the strongest asset that each and every one of you have is your brain, and what you think about and what you take action on, that will become your reality, and your mentality creates your reality. May God bless each and every one of you, and bye for now. Thank you, Dr. Gene.
You're welcome. My pleasure, Arthur.
Thank you.